Metaphysical Manifesto, Audiobook Edition. The Broadcast, The Blood Test, and the Frequency War. By John Zerga Jr., The Heavy Metal Prophet. Part 3 of 4. Part 3. The Human Instrument. Chapter 11. The Soul is Tuner, Freedom, Faith, and the Spirit. The human being possesses two receivers. The senses, and the spirit. The senses are the hardware that picks up the demiurge's broadcast. The spirit is the receiver designed for God's frequency. Crucially, the heart, the will, is the chooser of frequencies. The senses are not the source of the problem. They are the attack vector. Jesus locates evil in the heart, not the senses. Out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, slander. The heart, corrupted by the fall, what theology calls original sin, tends toward the demiurge's frequency. It chooses the counterfeit. Once the choice is made, the senses report what the chosen frequency transmits. The problem is not having eyes. The problem is trusting eyes over the spirit. The philosopher Blaise Pascal wrote, "The heart has its reasons which reason knows nothing of." Pascal was not romanticizing emotion. He was identifying a mode of knowing that operates below the level of rational cognition. The heart perceives. The heart chooses. The heart tunes. Reason can analyze the choice after it is made, but the choice itself happens in a deeper chamber. Paul articulates this dual receiver structure precisely in Romans chapter 8. Those who live according to the flesh have their minds set on what the flesh desires, but those who live in accordance with the Spirit have their minds set on what the Spirit desires. The mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. Setting. The mind is the act of tuning. The flesh, the sensory world without God, tunes to the demiurge's death broadcast. The Spirit tunes to God's reality. The senses are good. They were designed by God, but they were designed to operate under the governance of the Spirit, not independently. When the Spirit is tuned to God, the senses deliver data that the Spirit interprets rightly. Abundance, providence, safety. When the Spirit is jammed or dormant, the senses deliver raw data that the demiurge interprets for the soul. Lack, threat, competition, death. Paul further states in 1 Corinthians, "The natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are folly to him, and he is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned." The natural person is the person operating on sensory data alone, without the Spirit receiver active. The things of the Spirit are trans-rational. They are perceivable only on a frequency the unaided senses cannot access. The psychologist Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and the founder of logotherapy, argued that the primary human drive is not pleasure or power, but meaning. He wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." Frankl discovered in Auschwitz what the framework describes metaphysically. The space between the broadcast and the response is the location of freedom. The stimulus is the demiurge's signal. The response is the soul's tuning. No one can take that space from you. Not the beast, not the dragon, not the demiurge. The dial is yours. The Holy Spirit transmits on the Spirit frequency. Faith is the act of tuning the Spirit receiver to God's reality. It is not belief without evidence. It is belief on the evidence of a different receiver. The believer is not ignoring the sensory data. The believer is receiving additional data, spiritual data, that recontextualizes what the senses report. Free will operates at the point of the dial. Every choice, to trust or to hoard, to share or to grasp, to endure or to retaliate, to receive the mark or to refuse it, is a choice between frequencies. The same visible situation presents itself. The beast system offers bread, safety, belonging. The senses report, this is provision, this is survival. Except, the Spirit reports, this is poison wrapped in bread. The Lamb provides, refuse. The choice is absolute, and it remakes the chooser in the act of choosing. Chapter 12. The Blood Test. Faith is the soul verification. John Carpenter's 1982 film The Thing supplies the operative metaphor. An alien organism perfectly imitates any living being it assimilates. It sits next to you. It talks. It breathes. It bleeds. It remembers conversations you had with the person it replaced. It is indistinguishable from a human in every observable particular. The only verification is the blood test. A hot wire applied to a blood sample in a petri dish. The thing's blood will recoil, attempt to escape. The human's blood will not. The demiurge's reality looks exactly like God's reality. The same hospital room, the same empty pantry, the same armed soldier at the door, the same gravestone in the rain. The only blood test is faith. The author of Hebrews defines faith in precisely these terms. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Faith is not wishful thinking. It is a conviction, a form of knowledge, received through a non-sensory channel. It is the spirit receiver reporting data the senses cannot access. The philosopher William James, in his essay The Will to Believe, argued that there are situations in which we must make a decision without sufficient evidence, and that in such situations, our passional nature not only may but must decide. James was writing about religious faith. Specifically, he argued that the option to believe or not believe is living, forced, and momentous. You cannot avoid the choice. Refusing to choose is itself a choice. James wrote, "We cannot escape the issue by remaining skeptical and waiting for more light, because, although we do avoid error in that way if religion be untrue, we lose the good, if it be true, just as certainly as if we positively chose to disbelieve." The blood test is not optional. Every soul applies it. Every soul chooses a frequency. The question is not whether you will choose. The question is which choice you will make. When the Hebrew midwives refused Pharaoh's order to kill the male infants, they looked at the most powerful throne on earth and saw a paper tiger. They feared God more than Pharaoh because their spirit receivers were tuned to a frequency where Pharaoh was already judged and the infants were already safe. When Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused the golden image, they looked at a furnace heated 7 times over and saw a doorway. The fourth man in the fire was always there. When Jesus refused to turn stones to bread in the wilderness, he looked at hunger and saw the Father's provision. The sensory data said starvation. The Spirit said manna. He chose the Spirit. Every one of them was living in God's dimension while standing in the demiurge's territory. The visible facts were identical for the faithful and the faithless. What differed was the interpretation. The interpretation determined the action. The action revealed which reality the actor inhabited. The mark of the beast is the ultimate acceptance of the counterfeit as the only dimension. It is the soul declaring, "This broadcast is all there is. I will secure myself within it. I will trade my spiritual perception for sensory survival. I will trust the senses absolutely." The seal of God is the opposite. It says, "This broadcast is a lie. God provides. I will not trade my spiritual perception for anything the beast offers, up to and including the continuation of my biological processes." Chapter 13. The lack-lie chain. The demiurge's broadcast operates through a precise causal chain. It moves from lack, to jealousy, to fear, to rage, to violence, and finally to death. This is not an abstract construct. It is the engine of human history. The philosopher René Girard, in his theory of mimetic desire, argued that human beings do not desire objects directly. We desire what others desire. We learn what is valuable by watching what others want. This mimetic desire inevitably produces rivalry. Rivalry produces conflict. Conflict produces violence. Violence threatens to destroy the community. The community resolves the threat by uniting against a scapegoat, a single victim whose death restores peace. Girard's theory describes the lack-lie chain with clinical precision. The serpent whispered lack to Eve. Eve saw that the fruit was desirable, and she saw it through the serpent's eyes. Mimetic desire. The lack spread to Adam. The lack produced shame. Shame produced hiding. Hiding produced blame. Blame produced the first murder. Cain killed Abel because Abel's sacrifice was accepted and Cain's was not. Mimetic rivalry. The lack-lie chain had begun. Lamech sang his song of 70-fold vengeance. Babel rose on lack fear of being scattered. Pharaoh enslaved Israel out of lack fear of losing labor. Rome crucified Christ out of lack fear of losing power. Every war, every genocide, every act of oppression traces back to the same signal: you do not have enough. They are taking what is yours. Secure yourself. The first blood cried from the ground. The river of blood at the winepress. In Revelation is the same blood, multiplied across history, harvested at last. The broadcast's final argument is always the same. The blood test answers it. Part 4. The Christ event. Chapter 14. The incarnation is frequency hack. Here is the central narrative. The incarnation. When God becomes flesh, the infinite enters the finite. But how does Christ perform miracles? How does he walk on water? How does he heal with a word? Within this framework, miracles are not breaking the laws of physics. They are the act of the creator overriding the counterfeit sub-layer. When Jesus walks on water, he is not breaking reality. He is refusing to acknowledge the interference. He looks past the demiurge's false frequency to the original design of the Father. He sees the water not as a liquid, subject to the laws of the broadcast, but as a creation of the Father. Because he is the Logos, the interference patterns of the construct do not apply to him. He is the master architect walking through his own building, without needing to use the doors. When Jesus heals the man at Bethesda, he bypasses the entire demiurgic system with a single command: rise, take up your bed, and walk. He does not help the man into the pool. He does not rebuke the angel tradition. He demonstrates that the middleman is unnecessary. Healing comes directly from the Son. When Jesus refuses to turn stones to bread in the wilderness, he is refusing the demiurge's interpretation of hunger. The sensory data screams starvation. The broadcast says, "You are the Son of God. Prove it. Feed yourself. Secure yourself." Jesus tunes to the spirit frequency. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. The entire ministry of Jesus is a systematic demonstration that the demiurge's broadcast has no authority over the Logos. He walks on the signal. He overrides the interference. He is the frequency hack. Chapter 15. The Cross, the demiurge's masterpiece. The crucifixion is the demiurge's ultimate argument that the broadcast is the only reality. Look, the Son of God, dead on a Roman cross. Look, his blood spilled on the ground. Look, the tomb sealed with a stone. The senses report total defeat. The broadcast declares, God does not provide. Death wins. The lamb is food for worms. But the cross is also, simultaneously, the systemic hack that destroys the demiurge's legal machinery. Paul writes in Colossians that Christ cancelled the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. This he set aside, nailing it to the cross. He disarmed the rulers and authorities, and put them to open shame, by triumphing over them in him. The demiurge weaponizes law, rules, and middleman systems to create cages. The cross disarms these powers. The legal broadcast is jammed at its source. The record of debt, the demiurge's principal weapon of accusation, is nailed to the wood and rendered inert. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche saw the cross as the ultimate symbol of weakness, the victory of slave morality over the noble, life-affirming values of the ancient world. He was wrong, but he was wrong in an instructive way. Nietzsche could not see past the broadcast. He looked at the cross and saw only the sensory data, a dead man, a failed revolution, a religion of resentment. He could not perceive the frequency hack. He could not see that the death was the victory. The broadcast interpreted the cross as defeat. The spirit interpreted it as triumph. Nietzsche was tuned to the wrong frequency. Chapter 16. The Resurrection, the broadcast broken. The resurrection is the definitive blood test. Jesus rises with flesh and bone. He eats fish. He invites Thomas to touch his wounds. The resurrection body is not an escape from materiality. It is the restoration of materiality to its proper perceptual governance. In the resurrection, the senses and the spirit are no longer at war. The body is fully spirit governed. The broadcast has no more purchase. The risen Christ walks through walls not because walls are unreal but because his body operates on God's frequency, where walls are permeable to love and doors are unnecessary. The copy could not hold him. The copy could not interpret his death correctly. The copy broke. The new heavens and the new earth are the garden fully restored to perception, no longer a hidden dimension accessible only by faith. The only dimension. The broadcast silenced forever. End of part 3 of 4.